Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The first thing I noticed about the studio apartment wasn't the water stains on the ceiling or the ancient radiator that clanged like chains in the night. It was how the bathroom mirror seemed too large for such a cramped space, stretching almost wall to wall above the chipped porcelain sink. The landlord, a nervous man with darting eyes, had mentioned something about previous tenants leaving suddenly, but the rent was cheap enough for a newly divorced PE teacher trying to rebuild his life. I should have asked more questions. The first night, exhausted from moving boxes up 3 flights of creaking stairs, I stumbled into the bathroom to brush my teeth. The overhead bulb cast harsh shadows, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone standing behind me in the reflection. When I turned around, nothing. Just the narrow shower stall and the window that faced what the landlord had described as a charming courtyard, but was really just a dead-end alley barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I blamed it on stress. The divorce had been brutal, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about my life. Sarah had taken the house, most of our friends, and my confidence along with her. This cramped studio in the old downtown district was supposed to be a fresh start, not a place where shadows played tricks on tired eyes. But the second night, as I reached for my toothbrush, I saw him again. Clearer this time. A figure standing directly behind me, arms crossed, watching. The reflection lasted only a few seconds, but long enough for me to notice he was smiling. Not a friendly smile, something knowing, almost satisfied. I spun around so fast I knocked over my soap dispenser. Empty space greeted me, the sound of plastic hitting tile echoing off the cramped walls. My heart hammered as I checked the shower, even opened the small linen closet, knowing it was ridiculous. No one could fit in there, and besides, I'd locked the front door. The window drew my attention next. I pressed my face against the glass, peering into the narrow alley below. Brick walls rose on either side, creating a canyon of shadow that the streetlights couldn't penetrate. The passage ended abruptly, at a blank wall maybe 20 feet from the building. There was literally nowhere for someone to hide, nowhere they could position themselves to create such a clear reflection in my mirror. Sleep came fitfully that night. Every creak of the old building made me tense, and twice I got up to check the front door's deadbolt. In the morning light streaming through the bedroom's single window, my paranoia seemed foolish. The apartment felt smaller and shabbier than it had the night before, but normal, safe. That illusion lasted until evening. This time I was prepared. I'd positioned myself carefully in front of the mirror, watching not just my own reflection, but the space behind me. For several minutes, nothing happened. I began to feel stupid, like a child afraid of monsters under the bed. Then, as I reached for my razor, the other figure materialized. The reflection was sharper now, more defined. I could make out details that made my skin crawl. He wore a faded blue t-shirt, the same one I'd worn the day before, now crumpled in my laundry basket. His hair was the same length as mine, the same color, but styled differently. Where I kept mine neat and short, his fell slightly over his forehead in a way that made him look younger, more carefree. Most disturbing of all, his movements echoed mine with a barely perceptible delay. When I raised my hand, he raised his a split second later. When I tilted my head, he followed suit, but the timing was just off enough to be noticeable. And through it all, that smile never wavered. I tried talking to the reflection, feeling ridiculous even as I did it. "Who are you? What do you want?" My voice bounced off the bathroom tiles, creating an odd echo that seemed to answer itself. But the figure in the mirror only continued mimicking my movements, that unsettling smile fixed on his face like it had been painted there. When I finally worked up the courage to turn around, he vanished instantly, leaving me staring at my own wild-eyed reflection in an otherwise empty bathroom. The next few days established a pattern that gnawed at my sanity. Every evening, as shadows lengthened and the old building settled into its nightly symphony of creaks and groans, he would appear. Each time, the reflection grew more solid, more real. I began to notice small details that shouldn't have been possible. A scar on his chin that matched one I'd gotten falling off my bike as a kid. The way he favored his left shoulder, just like I did after an old soccer injury. But there were differences too. His clothes were always mine from the previous day, as if he was living my life one day behind. When I'd worn my red polo shirt to school on Tuesday, he appeared Wednesday night wearing it. When I'd tried a new hairstyle Thursday morning, he showed up Friday evening sporting the same look, but somehow it appeared more confident on him. The worst part was how he'd started trying to reach through the glass. At first, it was subtle. A hand pressed against the mirror's surface as if testing its solidity. But gradually, his attempts became more aggressive. I'd watch, horrified as his fingers seemed to push slightly into the reflective surface, causing ripples like he was touching water instead of solid glass. Desperate for answers, I started researching the building's history. The local library's archives revealed a disturbing pattern. Every tenant of apartment 3B had left suddenly, usually in the middle of their lease. The records were vague, citing personal reasons or health concerns. But when I tracked down contact information for a few former residents, the conversations were brief and unsettling. One man hung up immediately when I mentioned the address. Another, after a long pause, simply said, "You need to get out of there before you can't tell which one is you anymore," then refused to say anything else. But the most chilling conversation was with Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who'd lived there in the late 90s. When I called, she was silent for so long, I thought the line had gone dead. "The mirror," she finally whispered. "I haven't looked in a mirror properly since I left that place. Never could be sure which reflection was really mine." She hung up before I could ask what she meant. By the second week, the boundary between day and night, between normal and impossible, began to blur. I'd catch glimpses of movement in every reflective surface. Windows, the black screen of my phone, even the polished chrome of the school's water fountains. Always the same figure, always wearing yesterday's clothes, always smiling that knowing smile. My students started noticing my distraction. During soccer practice, I found myself constantly glancing at the school's windows, searching for faces that shouldn't be there. My apartment became a maze of covered mirrors and avoided surfaces. I'd shower with my eyes closed, brush my teeth facing away from the bathroom mirror, but avoidance only made things worse. The night everything changed, I'd been trying to work up the courage to pack my things and leave. I'd already lost most of my security deposit, but my sanity seemed worth more than money. I was stuffing clothes into a duffel bag when I heard something that made my blood freeze. Humming. The melody was coming from the bathroom, but I was alone in the apartment. I crept toward the sound, each step making the old floorboards groan beneath my weight. The bathroom door was ajar, just as I'd left it, but warm yellow light spilled from the crack in a way that didn't match the harsh white of the overhead bulb. When I pushed the door open, the humming stopped. The mirror showed two reflections standing side by side. Both of us were wearing the gray sweatshirt I'd put on that morning. Both had the same stubble from skipping my morning shave. Both wore identical expressions of shock and fear, but only one of us was humming again, and it wasn't me. The other reflection, my doppelganger, my shadow, whatever he was, raised his hand and placed it flat against the glass from his side. This time, there was no barrier. His palm pressed through the surface, as if the mirror was made of water, creating ripples that spread outward from the point of contact. I stumbled backward, but my reflection in the mirror didn't move. Instead, the other figure stepped sideways, taking my place in the center of the reflection. Now he stood where I should be, wearing my clothes, copying my posture perfectly. When I raised my hand in horror, he raised his in perfect synchronization. But when I looked down at my own hand, I saw that it had become slightly translucent, as if I was the reflection now, as if I was the one on the wrong side of the glass. The apartment felt different suddenly, more solid and less solid at the same time. Colors seemed brighter, but also somehow fake. like a photograph of a place rather than the place itself. When I touched the bathroom wall, my hand passed through it slightly before meeting resistance, as if the surface was only mostly there. I ran to the window, pressing my face against the glass to peer into the alley below. For the first time, I could see movement in those shadows. Other figures walking back and forth in that impossible narrow space, all wearing clothes I recognized, all looking up at my window with faces I was beginning to recognize as my own. The truth hit me like a physical blow. There had never been just one other reflection. The alley below wasn't empty. It was crowded with them. All the previous versions of myself from every day I'd lived in this apartment. All the people I'd been, walking endlessly in that space between mirrors. That space between what is and what might be. And now, as I watched my newest reflection settle comfortably into place in the bathroom mirror, practicing my expressions and testing out my smile, I understood what Mrs. Chen had meant. I couldn't tell which one was really me anymore. The figure in the mirror waved at me with my own hand, his smile widening as he began to move around the apartment with growing confidence. He looked so real, so right, so much more like what I used to be before the divorce, before the doubt, before everything fell apart. Maybe he was more me than I was. As I write this, sitting on what might be a bed, in what might be my apartment, watching what might be my reflection live, what might be my life, I have to wonder if the other tenants really left the building at all. Or if, like me, they simply stepped too close to the mirror one too many times and found themselves on the wrong side of the glass, watching someone else wear their face and live their days. The humming has started again, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. It's a tune I don't recognize, but somehow I know all the words. And in the distance, I can hear footsteps in that narrow alley that goes nowhere, pacing back and forth like someone waiting for their turn to step into the light. Tomorrow, I think my reflection will go to work. He'll teach my classes and grade my papers and maybe even call Sarah to see how she's doing. He'll do all the things I used to do, probably better than I ever did them. And I'll be here, in this place that's almost my apartment but not quite, watching through glass that's almost a mirror but not quite, trying to remember which side of reality I'm supposed to be on. The humming is getting louder now, and I think I'm starting to understand the words. Story 2. The fluorescent lights above my workstation hummed their electric death song, casting everything in that sickly white glow that makes even healthy skin look corpse pale. 3:47 a.m., according to the digital clock embedded in my monitor's corner. The Meridian Shopping Center had been closed for hours, its vast corridors echoing with the occasional groan of settling concrete and the distant whisper of air conditioning systems cycling through their endless routines. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the familiar burn of strained retinas and too much caffeine. The database migration had to be complete by morning. Corporate breathing down my neck, threatening consequences that felt more real than the shadows dancing at the edge of my peripheral vision. My fingers moved across the keyboard in practiced rhythms, each keystroke a small rebellion against the crushing weight of the deadline. The shopping center after midnight was a different creature entirely. During the day, it pulsed with life. Families, teenagers, the elderly walking their measured loops for exercise. But now, in these dead hours, it felt like the hollow bones of some prehistoric beast. Store security gates stood like metal teeth, and the fountain in the central court had been turned off, leaving only a dark circle of pennies and wishes abandoned at the bottom. I'd been here since 6 p.m., setting up servers and running diagnostics in the small IT office tucked behind the customer service desk. Most of the other tenants had long since gone home, leaving me alone with the hum of machines and the occasional echo of my own footsteps when I ventured out for coffee from the vending machine near the food court. By 4:15, I was finally done. The migration had completed without errors, backup systems were running smoothly, and I could feel the sweet relief of another crisis averted washing over me like warm water. I packed my laptop, gathered the scattered cables and diagnostic tools, and headed for the employee exit near the loading dock. The security guard at the front desk had dozed off, his chin resting on his chest, radio crackling softly with periodic check-ins from other guards scattered throughout the building. I didn't wake him. Better to let the man catch what sleep he could during these graveyard hours. The employee parking lot stretched out before me like a black ocean, punctuated by islands of yellow light from scattered street lamps. Most of the spots were empty now, just my car and a few others belonging to the overnight cleaning crew and security staff. The air was crisp with the promise of dawn, though the sky remained stubbornly dark. I was halfway to my car when I noticed it. An old sedan, maybe from the 70s, sat in the far corner of the lot where the overhead lights created a pool of shadow. Its headlights were on, casting weak beams across the asphalt, but something about the light seemed wrong. Instead of the clean white or yellow glow of modern headlights, these emitted a pale, grayish luminescence that seemed to absorb rather than illuminate. The car had no rear license plate. Where the plate should have been, there was only a dark rectangle of metal, as if someone had carefully removed it and painted over the mounting holes. I paused, keys in hand, studying the vehicle. There was no sign of a driver, though the angle made it difficult to see through the windshield. The engine must have been running to power the headlights, but I couldn't hear anything. No idle, no rumble, no mechanical sounds at all. Just the distant hum of the shopping center's climate control systems and the soft whisper of wind through the parking lot's landscaping. Something about the scene felt deeply wrong, like walking into a room and knowing someone had been there moments before, leaving only the lingering sense of presence and the faint displacement of air. I quickened my pace toward my own car, a reliable Honda that suddenly seemed impossibly far away. As I reached my vehicle and fumbled with the door lock, I heard it, or rather didn't hear it, the absence of sound where sound should be. I turned to see the old sedan rolling toward me, its headlights growing brighter, but still emitting no engine noise whatsoever. It moved with the fluid grace of something underwater, silent and purposeful. My hands shook as I finally got the key into the lock and yanked the door open. I threw myself behind the wheel, started the engine, and backed out of the parking space with more speed than caution. In my rearview mirror, the old car continued its silent approach, headlights now close enough that I could see the strange quality of their illumination more clearly. The light wasn't just gray, it seemed to shift and pulse, creating patterns that made my eyes water when I tried to focus on them. More disturbing still, every digital clock I could see, the one on my dashboard, the LED display on a nearby bank, even the timestamp on a security camera mounted on a light pole, had begun to flicker erratically. Numbers changed too quickly. Dates jumped forward and backward, as if time itself was having some kind of mechanical seizure. I gunned the engine and raced toward the parking lot exit, tires squealing against the cold asphalt. The old car followed, maintaining a steady distance of about 50 yards, its gray headlights creating a cone of wrongness that seemed to warp everything it touched. Street signs appeared to age and weather in the span of seconds when caught in that light, paint fading and metal showing rust that hadn't been there moments before. The digital clock on my dashboard had gone completely haywire. Instead of showing the current time of around 4:30 a.m., it flickered through what appeared to be random combinations of numbers. 7:42, 11:15, 23:88. Dates that couldn't exist mixed with times that made no sense. The radio cut in and out, catching fragments of broadcasts that seemed to come from different decades. News reports about events I didn't recognize. Music that sounded both familiar and alien. I took a hard right onto the main road, hoping to lose my silent pursuer in the maze of suburban streets that led to my apartment complex. But every time I checked the mirror, those gray headlights were there, maintaining their exact distance like some kind of automotive predator following the scent of prey. The most unnerving part was the complete absence of sound from the other vehicle. My engine roared and strained as I pushed it harder than I ever had before, but the car behind me moved with the silence of a ghost ship drifting through fog. It should have been impossible. Cars made noise, engines had sounds, tires gripped and released asphalt with audible friction. This thing violated every law of physics I understood. As I drove, something else began to happen. The familiar landmarks of my route home started to look different. Street signs I'd read hundreds of times appeared faded and weathered, as if years of exposure had aged them in minutes. The convenience store where I sometimes stopped for coffee looked run down, its neon signs dark, and its parking lot cracked with weeds growing through the asphalt. Most disturbing of all, I began to feel a strange disconnection from my own body, as if I was watching myself drive from somewhere slightly above and to the left. My hands on the steering wheel looked unfamiliar, older somehow, with lines and spots I didn't remember having. When I tried to focus on this sensation, it slipped away like water through my fingers, leaving only a lingering unease. I made another series of random turns, hoping to confuse whatever navigation system the other car might be using, but it followed every move with mechanical precision. The gray light from its headlights seemed to be getting stronger, and wherever it touched, things changed. A freshly painted fence became weathered and peeling. A new street lamp flickered and dimmed as if its bulb was failing. Even the leaves on trees seemed to brown and curl at the edges when caught in that strange illumination. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled into an all-night gas station, parking under the bright fluorescent canopy and rushing inside. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Jessica, looked up from her magazine as I burst through the door. "You okay, sir? You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned to look through the windows at the parking lot. The old car was there, sitting at the edge of the light, its gray headlights dim but still visible. "Do you see that car out there? The old one with the weird headlights?" Jessica followed my gaze, squinting through the glass. "What car? I just see yours under the canopy." I looked again. The old sedan was clearly visible to me, sitting in the shadows like some mechanical vulture waiting for carrion. But Jessica's confusion seemed genuine. Either she was lying, or she literally couldn't see what was right in front of both of us. "Never mind," I said, backing toward the door. "Just tired, I guess." I bought a large coffee I didn't want and returned to my car, hands shaking as I started the engine again. The digital clock on the dashboard now showed 7:23 a.m., though I was certain only minutes had passed since I'd left the shopping center. According to my car's odometer, I'd driven nearly 40 miles, though I couldn't remember traveling more than 5 or 6. The old car resumed its pursuit as soon as I left the gas station, following me through the increasingly bright morning streets with that same mechanical persistence. Other drivers seemed oblivious to its presence, changing lanes around me without apparent awareness that there was a second vehicle involved in our strange procession. When I finally reached my apartment complex, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I checked my watch, nearly 9 a.m., but that was impossible. I'd left work around 4:30, stopped at the gas station for maybe 10 minutes, and driven straight home. The trip should have taken 30 minutes at most, not 4.5 hours. I parked and sat in my car for several minutes, watching the old sedan in my rearview mirror. It had stopped at the entrance to the complex, headlights still glowing that strange gray color even in the bright morning light. Finally, I gathered my courage and got out of the car. The moment my feet touched the pavement, the old car began to move again, backing away from the complex entrance with the same silent grace it had shown all morning. It rolled backwards down the street, headlights fading gradually until it disappeared entirely, leaving only the normal sounds of morning traffic and suburban life. I stood there for a long time trying to process what had just happened. When I finally went inside, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson was checking her mail. "Good morning, David," she said pleasantly. "Haven't seen you in a few days. How was your business trip?" "Business trip?" I asked, confused. "I haven't been on any business trip." She gave me an odd look. "You left Monday morning with that big suitcase. Today's Thursday. Are you feeling all right, dear?" I ran upstairs to my apartment, hands shaking as I unlocked the door. The calendar on my kitchen wall showed Thursday, October 15th, but the last date I remembered clearly was Monday, October 12th. 3 days had simply vanished from my life, leaving only the memory of a night drive that should have lasted 30 minutes but had somehow consumed nearly 5 hours. Over the following weeks, it happened again, and again. Each time I would stay late at work, and each time the old car would be waiting in the parking lot when I finally left. The pursuits became routine, though no less terrifying. The gray headlights would follow me home through streets that seemed to age years and minutes, past digital clocks that spun through time like broken slot machines. while hours or sometimes entire days disappeared from my life. I began to document everything, time-stamped photos that showed my car's clock jumping forward inexplicably, videos of the pursuit that somehow came out blank or corrupted, notes about missing days that I would find in my own handwriting, describing events I couldn't remember. The worst part was the gradual realization that I was aging faster than I should be. Lines appeared around my eyes seemingly overnight. My hair began to show gray that hadn't been there before. My joints ached in ways they never had, as if years of wear were accumulating in days. I tried everything. Different routes home, leaving work at different times, even sleeping in the office to avoid the parking lot entirely. But somehow, the old car always found me. It was as if it existed in the spaces between moments, waiting patiently for me to emerge into the night. The shopping center's security footage became my obsession. I convinced the head of security to let me review the tapes from each night, hoping to find some clue about the car's origin or destination. What I found was even more disturbing than I'd expected. The car never appeared on the cameras. According to the official record,